I'm sorry, we're just waiting for a moment.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, yes. Oh, she's on.
There we go.
Great.
Perfect.
Yes, can you hear us, Allison?
She's probably got the mic.
There we go.
Perfect.
Hey.
You were there. All right, so item 12 is a report of the accreditation team to Antioch Unified School District. We have consultant Erin Sullivan will introduce this team. Joining her by Zoom is the team lead, Allison DeMarc, and institutional representative, Amy Betancourt, program director. Ms. Sullivan, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you. So as you've heard, this is the report of the accreditation site visit to Antioch Unified School District. Allison DeMarc, who's joining us by Zoom, was our team lead. Antioch has a teacher induction program. This was the first accreditation visit for Antioch's induction program, even though that program has been around for some time. Of course, was a BITSA program previously. We held the visit on February 5th through 7th. I would just like to say that the team and all of its needs were fully supported by the institution. Amy was really on call at all times. Any pieces of additional evidence that we needed, or just to sit down with her for 15 or 30 or more minutes to pick her brain, the team got everything that it needed from Amy at all times. The team, through a thorough review of the teacher induction program preconditions, common standards, program assessment documents, and evidence submissions, and through interviews with institutional leadership, school site leadership, mentors, completers, and candidates, had a very successful accreditation visit. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Allison to tell you the rest.
Hello, thank you for having me. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right. I'd also like to thank Antioch Unified School District and Amy Betancourt for the hospitality during the site visit a few weeks ago. It was really apparent in our interviews with district leadership that the focus of the district is recruiting and retaining high-quality educators. In fact, an interview that was held with the director of HR was held on the phone because she was touring and visiting historically Black colleges to recruit teachers for AUSD. And even over the phone, the love for the district and the vision for creating an environment of support for new teachers was completely evident. In meeting with all of the stakeholders, it was obvious that the district has an amazing district personnel and administration. The team was thoroughly impressed with the knowledge of all of these educators and their ability to connect their content to the induction standards. Throughout the interview process, participants really voiced their appreciation towards Amy and the induction team. Amy has been in the role leading this program for a little over 18 months. Lucky her, this has also been the time great for our induction world. Although Amy would say, I don't know any different. This is the only way I know. Her candidates, mentors, completers, advisory board, and administrators all state that the positive changes that they've seen in the program go beyond the formative assessment and is just-in-time support. It really is the feeling of inclusiveness, expertise, and support that all stakeholders felt were the foundation of Antioch's induction program. The site team felt that the participating teachers were truly being inducted in the profession. This was evident in conversations with the district superintendent, district leadership administrators. It was incredible to hear the same language when speaking with anyone from Antioch. They truly strive to recruit and retain strong teachers. At the conclusion of the site visit, the team determined that all the standards have been met. The recommendation for Antioch School District is accreditation. In closing, as we move towards a more mentor-driven program, which is really hard for so many of us, I'd like to share some thoughts and quotes from a few of the mentor teachers in Antioch. We heard, mentoring has made me a better teacher. Another SP said that I constantly am learning from my participating teacher. And my favorite was probably, the program has evolved over time. It encourages teachers to be more reflective. It teaches all of us to be more reflective, which is exactly what we're looking for in induction program. I'm done.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mark. All right, this is the time we call an institution to say a few words about the visit. This is not the time to dispute the team findings, if you choose to, but rather provide any thoughts you had about the visit. So, Ms. Bencourt.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'd like to thank Allison very much for her leadership with the visiting team. They were wonderful. And of course, Erin, through her guidance, I've been in induction for 18 months. It was a little bit overwhelming in the beginning when I found out we were going to be in the green cohort and just roll right in. But with it, I think it was perfect timing for me to come in as a new director because I don't have all the baggage of the old system in my mind that I'm grappling with. So what I'd like to say about the new standards, having gone through BITSA 99 myself and being a site administrator for many years, the program impact is monumental compared to what we used to see under the old standards. My site administrators rave about our program now because of the individualization that their candidates are able to do to meet their own needs versus the program determining what their needs are. Also, we used to beg our quality teachers to mentor because, it's a work of heart. We up our stipend, but if you figured it out hourly, they make pennies on the dollar. And now everybody's clamoring to be a mentor because it's really about the mentor relationship, not about the box. And so those people who want to give back truly feel they can and give that just-in-time support that they're proud to be able to give individuals. So, and then for my candidates that we went into the new standards last year. We wanted a full year of practice. I was new, let's just go all in. And so this year is actually our second year. So my completers were able to speak about having one foot in the old system their first year and then going into the new system the second year. And it's remarkable the feedback that we received in that they feel truly supported and that the growth has been accelerated in the new program versus the old because they don't feel they're going through hoops or that it's burdensome. And it's not that the entire program is burdensome, but there was a lot of lockstep things that maybe they didn't feel were pertinent to their growth, to the idea that they select what they're going to work on, that it's supported with a variety of resources and layering in of different people and their site administrators being absolutely critical to the triad. So it's just wonderful. And I'm excited to be in induction at this point, and I think that our program is much better for this visit and is much better for the new standards. So thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee members? Committee member Webb.
I was really excited to read your report, and a particular interest is the professional development that you have. I was wondering if you could just share out what that looks, because it sounded really interesting, and I just am curious to hear what that looks like.
Sure. So what we do at the beginning of the year is we survey our teachers coming in and say, what do you think your greatest needs are going to be? And then based on that, we work towards building a menu of options for them to select from as they go through our program based on the trends that populate. Typically, classroom management's the number one, and then we work backwards from there. So we work hard at our seminars when we do bring candidates together to give them that voice and choice in professional development offerings. We also have an understanding in Antioch Unified about the population that we serve and that what they're going to need. And many of our new teachers aren't really in tune. They come in enthusiastic with a picture of what their classroom's going to be, and then they encounter our population. So we layer in what we also know is going to be beneficial, especially in serving African American male students and students of poverty. So those are always choices for our candidates to select, and we usually offer a 2.5-hour workshop about every 6 weeks based on what they recommend or are offering or requesting, and then what we know that they're going to need, and they select from there.
Thank you. Any other further comments or questions? This is an action item, so is there a motion to accept a recommendation of the site visit and the accreditation team to Antioch Unified School District for full accreditation? So moved by Committee Member Erickson. Is there a second? Seconded by Committee Member Scone. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mark, Ms. Bencourt, and Ms. Sullivan. Thank you very much. We are ahead of schedule,
We could do the handbook.
and so we want to move item.
We can move 17.
All right. I'll refer your attention to item 17. Let's go ahead and move item 17. That was the afternoon plan. Let's do that now, and then after that we can do lunch.
Right. Sounds good. So after lunch, then, just a quick touch base. So we have, let's see, 2 accreditation visit reports, and then we have 2 items, which would be, one of them is a demonstration that Nicole Hill is going to do for us on the data system, so that you guys have a really good sense of it. So that's good.
Okay.
So we can do the handbook item right now. So I think last time I talked to you all about the challenges we were having with getting the cost recovery regulations moved through the Office of Administrative Law. So the extraordinary fee cost recovery piece are for those items that are extraordinary. So they're not for your regular annual accreditation fees. They are for things like late reports, for brand new institutions coming to California that want to go through the initial institutional process. They're for the new programs. I can't even remember what that, if you were to determine that we need a focused site visit or a revisit, the institution picks up that cost. So it's those extraordinary things outside of the regular accreditation system. So the commission had approved changing the regulations so that the language in that section of the regs reflects our current brand new system. So it took out things like biannual reports, program assessment, and wanted to replace them with annual data system and program review. And so it was really minor changes, but that's not how the Office of Administrative Law always looks at things. So they, as I mentioned before, they had really wanted to delve into the handbook because the regs that we had referenced the handbook. And so it was going to be sort of a monumental readjustment of the handbook. And so we talked to both our attorneys and we've talked to, and we've strategized about how to do this. And so long story short, you don't need to know all the ugly details of regulatory promulgation, but essentially what we've decided to do is basically withdraw our package from the Office of Administrative Law and start with a new strategy or new approach. And that would be that we would not reference the handbook, but instead in the regulations we would actually define the things that we need to define. And it would be consistent with what's in the handbook and what's in other areas. So in other words, we would have to define what program review is, and we would have to define rather than referencing the entire handbook process. So we think that will be a more clear-cut process. We don't know yet, but we will move that forward. We do need to go to the commission to approve those regulatory changes and stuff. So that all brought us to, we thought we needed a whole bunch of changes in the handbook, but we really don't. But when we looked at the handbook, one of the areas that the attorneys said, I don't understand this, it doesn't make sense. And as we looked more at it, we also agreed with that. So, and that was the appeals process. Now, no institution has ever appealed an accreditation decision. That's never happened before. We don't want it to happen because the law around appeals process says that an institution cannot appeal it based on the fact that a team did not look at certain evidence or certain information, but rather that they acted arbitrarily or capriciously or with some sort of bias. So we do our best to avoid that processy issue. And so we've been successful to date in doing that. But nevertheless, the language was very unclear and confusing in that section. So we tried, that's where we thought, well, you know what, since we are opening this anyways, let's go to the COA and have you reconsider that section. You can take action today, or you can say you want me to do more work or us to do more work and we come back next time. There's no urgency to it. But we should kind of clean up that section. So what we've put before you, and there's a couple of little minor things. So let's look at item 17, let's go to page 2. And it was just, that particular paragraph was just brought to my attention that it was a little awkward, the one that says following completion of the prerequisites. So we've just clarified that a little bit. We did not want to touch any of the eligibility, and this was the other piece that was confusing. The lawyer at OAL wanted us to change a lot about the criteria. That criteria for a new initial institutional approval has already been approved by the commission, and it went like 4 times to the commission. So the last thing we want to do is open that up again if we can if we cannot touch that section. That would be great. And so that was another reason we had to rethink the strategy. It's like, well, that's already adopted by the commission, and so we'd have to go back to the commission, and that was a tough discussion over and over again. So we're proposing the changes on page 2, which are just grammatical clarification. And then we're proposing some consideration of the change in the adverse decision on page 8, beginning on page 8. And what we tried to do here was to talk about how there's there's an appeal to commission decisions made by the commission staff or BIR, and that you would pretty much hear those cases. Or there's an appeal that's more about the institution doesn't like the decision COA has made, and that goes to the commission. So we tried to clarify those kind of differences in appeals. We understood, and it had been asked of us, well, we don't bring any new programs forward to you unless the reviewers have said it's ready to come before you. But we have heard from institutions from time to time who we are not bringing forward to you because we don't think it's ready. Well, you're getting in the way of us being able to state our case in front of the Committee on Accreditation. And so sure, if they want to appeal it at some point in time, they think that staff or the reviewers are dragging their heels on it, this gives them an option. I doubt that they would want to do that because it doesn't put them in a great light, but it's possible. So that's the section that we're talking about here, and can go ahead and wordsmith those all you would like. And then on top of page 10, we just added the clarification that once a program's been accredited by the COA, it will be considered an approved program and will enter the regular accreditation cycle. So that just clarified where they belong in the cycle. We made a couple little minor changes on page 11, or proposing, and that is dealing with new approved program sponsors authorized to offer California credentials. And the reason we added initial before focus site visit is because we use focus site visit in different contexts. And you all understand it. Office of Administrative Law didn't understand it. So we thought here we could clarify it. In this case, it would be the first visit under provisional approval. So those are the changes. Happy to take any questions I'm sorry, we had one more on page 14. That when an institution withdraws its last program, it's considered closed. We took that instead of loses approval because that sounds really negative, whereas they might withdraw just because they want to withdraw. It's not a bad program. They're just not going to offer it. So we just made it more neutral. It's considered closed and is no longer considered a commission-approved program. So those are the changes that we're proposing. And like I said, you could either be comfortable with it or we can go back to the drawing board and we can make changes. Yes.
So in looking at the appeals process, I guess I just need some clarification.
Sure.
Where it says decisions made by commission staff, is it typically that a consultant is assigned to an approved program? And is there a process where the program can request sort of a second look? It's almost like a precursor to this.
They can, and we have gotten that with. So the staff looks at the preconditions. We don't review the new program documents. That's BIR member trained field members. But we have had occasions where institutions have asked for different reviewers, and we can make that call. And I think that's actually happened fairly recently too, that a new program proposal didn't like the feedback that they got and thought that the reviewers were biased. We looked at the feedback and we told them no. So we have had that because we thought that the comments that the reviewers had was on target. So they can, and we have also brought in a third reviewer when either reviewers don't agree. That's happened too. We've brought in a third reviewer to say, okay, what do you think? Let's get another set of eyes on this.
Sure. So I guess what I'm saying is that rather than getting to this case where it comes to this committee, that
right.
If an institution wants a second opinion and they're willing to pay for it,
right?
I mean, the full
True.
cost of that.
That's an option.
Then there's a second set of eyes looking at it, and it could be that it confirming the first committee's or review recommendation, so that rather than this committee ending up with a whole onslaught of folks appealing, but rather that there be a cost associated with if they want a second opinion.
That's an interesting idea.
So this is good timing because if we're going to propose a another extraordinary fee, then this would be it. I think also what's an important distinction here is they wouldn't be coming forward necessarily and asking you to review. They're appealing the decision of the staff. So they would be bringing forward why the staff or why the BIR was capricious, rather than asking you to read the feedback. I feel like I'm splitting hairs, but and then you could direct us to get different reviewers or whatever, change our decision in that regard. So, I think the complaints usually are around like we're not moving it to the COA fast enough.
Right. How come
But
it's
we're
not
saving
going?
them from here and being denied.
Right. Exactly. That's usually the case, is that, things have to be completely aligned before we're going to bring them to you. There's no reason to.
But I think the most important thing is back to what's the level of that warrants appeals. It's not that the feedback they gave us we don't think we should have. It has to be about it being biased or capricious, not just like, well, we don't want to give them a table. We gave them a chart. That should be enough. That's not the kind of thing that warrants that is an allowable appeal, and certainly legal would weigh in.
Ms. Corey?
Catherine or Cheryl, would you clarify again, though, we don't have very many of these. I mean, it wouldn't be like now 50 people coming, to the commission or to the COA to say.
Right.
It might be 2.
Right.
Right. So it's not a large backlog.
It's not a large number. And most institutions, if they want to get approved, they want to make the readers happy. So they take the feedback very seriously. But on occasion, we might get somebody who says, doesn't think that the reviewers are on the right track. Yes, James.
I just wanted to say, I think that there are so many layers of review before it ever comes to this body that I certainly understand because you don't do it and then there's one that comes. But I do like your suggestion of a fee, because I think that because there are those different layers.
Right.
And we're trained in BRR that we sometimes have to get a third reviewer. And, discuss what's an outlier versus a systemic problem within the process.
Right.
So
we can certainly look into that as an option. It would need to be in the regs. So we would have to figure that out at this point in time. But yes, we could certainly look into it. So that they could ask for a third reviewer at their cost.
Committee Member Balatayo.
Would that then also create a backlog under, their timeline? And wouldn't that also create new regulations?
Yes, we would definitely need to put it in the regs, and it could create a backlog. The institution, actually, and that was one of the things that we told the institution, and I'm looking at Lynette because she handled this. The institution that wanted another reviewer, it's like, okay, but, if you go down that route, they're going to start from scratch, and it's going to delay rather than letting the reviewers that are currently reading it and are now familiar with it continue on with the review and just respond to their questions. But yes, it could add to a backlog a little bit, certainly for that institution.
Any further comments, questions? Coach Moore.
Page 9. All right. Top of the page. The COA will review the information and do one of the following. Our MET, should it be and grant initial approval to the program?
That's a good point. Yes.
Okay. And then a couple paragraphs down, it says the commission staff or the review panel may not be considered by the commission. Can we be more?
Can you?
Will
I'm trying to find
might
it.
Possibly be. It just was unclear. May not be.
Okay. Commission staff of the review may not be considered by the commission. Okay, got it.
may not be as a little ambiguous.
Okay. And you want to change it to will not be?
If that's the case.
Okay. Great. We can do that. I think that would still work.
That's it. Nice job.
Great.
Good job.
Yeah, there is other questions like as far as wordsmithing or not so much, but punctuation. That's something don't want to take the time now to
Right.
do.
You can send it to me.
Oh, that's
And
right.
we can clean it up once we accept any track changes. So on the first section, so what we could do is come back with this item at your next meeting if you'd like, after having looked into what Committee Member Alvarado is suggesting. Would you like us to do that?
And what's the general consensus? Does that sound like a good plan for everybody?
Okay. We'll look into that.
Looking into it, right? I'm making a decision, and then they'll come back with another report, or not a report, but the handbook that may or may not include that, but at least have their comments on that.
Right.
Right.
And then, if I may,
Sure.
probably you'd have to check, I'm sure, with legal and make
Yes.
sure that's,
Yeah.
that would be acceptable.
Right. I will do that. I actually think this, as Catherine mentioned, this is the good time. If you want to do that, this is the time to do it because we're proposing new regulations related to extraordinary fees. So we just have to justify it. And that I think is easy to justify.
One thing that we are trying to do in this new iteration of regulations is to be more generic in our language.
Yeah.
Because
Change it.
a lot of what is happening here is it's the same thing. It's late. And so it's out of the norm and it costs more to review.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but because we said if biennial reports are late or program assessment, that now if program review comes in late, we're stuck. So we'll also try to work within general language about how to address what you all are proposing, I think, so that we don't have to reopen a regulatory package every time we tweak something.
Right.
And does 4 weeks give you enough time to come back? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I think it'll be fine.
So doing the formal motion at all on that, or?
Oh, she did. Okay, good. Good. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Yeah. Right. It's a really hard thing to hit the right sweet spot because the language around the ed code around accreditation says it should be broad and flexible. It's really clear. Those are the two words it uses. And yet when we reference things like late reports, OAL wants to know which reports. They want us to be specific. So trying to find that sweet spot between being malleable enough over time to satisfying their need to have very specific things. That's a hard thing, but we'll give it a shot.
They also have a really hard understanding of your discretionary power.
Yes.
That was really difficult for them, which was a big driver in changing our strategy.
Yeah.
Is because we think that how this body operates is essential to the process working. But it wasn't very concrete. And so it's concrete here, but
yeah. Because some of the language that they took the most exception to were things that are splattered throughout that said, as deemed appropriate by COA or things like that give you flexibility depending on the nature of the visits and the nature of the facts around things. And they pushed on that. Well, what does that mean? What's the criteria? And it's hard to explain. And we gave them lots of information about accreditation and how it works, but that's a different world than they're used to. So
Cheryl, when I am looking through this chapter, I'm not seeing this chapter in the place where that insertion of that extraordinary fee would go. And so I don't know if the suggested language in changes to this chapter, I'm asking you really right now, it feels like it could move forward if this body was comfortable with the change to the appeal language and all that, and that the additional extraordinary fee could be a different item.
That's a good point.
There. So
That's a good point.
I feel like that if you were comfortable with the changes here, you actually could take action.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We approved the changes with the exception of adding the extraordinary fee.
Okay.
Okay, so moved by Committee Member Borges. Is there a second? Committee Member Scahn. Any discussion?
I don't know if this is the place to bring it up, but on page 10, it states that, well, let me get to page 10 now. Sorry. It states that once a program has been accredited by the COA, it will be considered an approved program and will enter the regular accreditation cycle. I wonder if this is being too picky, but adding maybe a sentence that or a section that says, with the exception of programs approved during the initial institutional approval cycle process, because those would not be added directly to the regular. But I know we're trying to streamline, so I don't know if that's just too much for that or not.
Are you talking about provisional programs, Lynette?
I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So
initial institutional approval process, programs that are approved don't go automatically into the regular.
Right.
So we can add, with the exception of those,
provisionally approved.
Provisionally approved. Does that work?
That's why I wanted to make sure that we were on the same.
Yeah. That's a good call. So what Lynette is talking about is those brand new institutions that get 2 to 3 years to run the program before the commission determines whether or not to give them permanent accreditation. That's the new process. So that's a good point.
Yeah, you've had 2, I think, come. Yeah. 2, I think, that have come before you with those program standards for those.
So we've amended something after the motion.
Right. So we go back to. That's a good point. So back to Committee Member Borges.
Okay, and
friendly amendment. With the amendment.
Friendly amendment. All right. And it was seconded by Committee Member Scahn. You
accept the amendment?
Still accept the amendment? Okay. At this point, any further discussion? So just to review, we are accepting the changes to the accreditation handbook as discussed here in the meeting, and with an additional consideration for a fee to be brought to the attention in the March meeting. All right. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so we are
lunchtime,
and our next one we have is 1 o'clock. Should we see if they can come a bit earlier at 12:45, or is that really pushing it? Do we have something that we can get through in time?
We might be able to get through surveys.
Okay.
Maybe.
That is.
So if you come back at 12:45, is that what we said? 12:45, and we can see whether we'll do the site visit first or one of the other items.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so let's adjourn for lunch, and we'll see you in 1 hour.
Great.
Welcome back from lunch. We are going to move to item 13, which is the report of the accreditation team to Simpson University. Consultant Bob Locks will introduce this item. Joining him at the table is the institutional representative Craig Cook, Dean of the School of Education. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? All right. Mr. Locks, will you begin?
First off, I would like to say that the team lead was not able to be here, Dr. Connie Campbell, and probably from a miscommunication from myself. And it was either that or she just got tired of working with me, because we actually just finished this visit last week. So it was a very quick turnaround here, and Dr. Cook was just very anxious to get this all taken care of. So last week, I took our rented state vehicle and headed the opposite way on I-5 than I did last time, and we drove 150 miles north to Redding, California, to visit Simpson University. And the one thing I would like to say on that is when they decided to drop Simpson in the middle of Redding, California, they did the right thing. That is the most beautiful location I've ever seen. We're in our workroom and we looked out and we'd see snow-covered Mount Shasta just a couple miles away, and it was really hard to keep our focus there, but we were there. Simpson University has two specific education programs, the multiple subject, single subject general ed program, and also the preliminary administrative services credential. In their multiple subject, single subject program, all program standards were fully met except for Standard 1, Program Design and Curriculum, which was met with concerns, and Standard 5, Implementation of a Teaching Performance Assessment, which was also met with concerns. On Standard 1, we felt that the program's design was not grounded in a clearly articulated theory of teaching and learning that is research and evidence-based. While the program leadership and faculty shared components that are informed by theoretical and research frameworks, there was no evidence of a clear conceptual framework or unit outcomes that guide program design or curriculum. The concern with Standard 5, implementation of a TPA, was to suggest that we saw evidence that the structural changes had been undertaken to implement the TPA according to the requirements of the new Cal TPA. However, there was insufficient evidence to confirm that this had been done prior to the new staff and administrators roles that were currently responsible for working on the implementing the TPA. And in short, what we saw is the last year and a half or 2 years that the program had really been focused on the TPA, and that had sort of been driving the program. But prior to that, we just could not see any evidence of that. The second program that they had, Preliminary Administrative Services Credential, was found to have all standards were fully met. Their common standards, Common Standards 2, 3, and 5 were met, and Common Standard 1, Institutional Infrastructure to Support Educator Preparation, was met with concerns, as was Common Standard 4, Continuous Improvement. Our rationale on Common Standard 1, the institutional infrastructure, was exactly the same as the Program Standard 1, where the research-based vision for the program was not identified in meetings with staff, faculty, or administrators. So it's actually kind of a double whammy. They got two met with concerns for the same issue, one on common standards and one for the program standards. The other standard, Standard 4, Continuous Improvement. The Simpson University implements some assessment measures within each of its programs that identifies programs and unit effectiveness. However, this process has potential to be further developed and systematized into a comprehensive continuous improvement process at both the unit and program level within each of its programs. And our issue here, and well, I shouldn't say the issue here, but I think the trap they fell into was that Simpson being a very small educational program, that the instructors and the dean and the program supervisors would always, they all knew each other and would talk to each other at least every week, and it was always very informal. So, and through those conversations, they were always talking about program improvement and along with a lot of other things, but we just didn't see that it was really systematized, and we felt that we just had to kind of point that out. So that was our big issue with that. So while there were 4 standards that we found met with concerns, we felt that 2 of them have kind of already been addressed and they're moving in that direction, and that the other 2 they have been starting to work on. So with that, the teams came to a unanimous decision to recommend a decision of accreditation.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. This is an opportunity for Simpson University to give us some more information and respond to the report. It's not an opportunity to argue the findings of the report. All right. Mr. Cook, would you please respond?
Thank you. We're pleased for the visit, and I've been up there in Reading at Simpson for this last year and a half after spending much of my time overseas. And so coming newly back into California after 20-some years overseas, it's great to get input. And, I think I've been managing transitions since I've been in this role the last year and a half. We've had 4 retirees in a very small program. And so I feel like we're heading in the right direction, and we're looking forward to articulating a strategic plan within the School of Ed, which includes a learning covenant that addresses that first common standard of a theory, research-based vision for all of our programs. So I think we're heading in that direction. And then the continuous improvement aspect, we work with the larger institution to continue to work on adjustments, look at data systematically and in a regularized kind of fashion. So, we're just pleased for the input, and it gives us a direction to move in. So that's all I'd like to say at this moment.
Okay, thank you so much. I'd like to open the floor up to the Committee on Accreditation to ask any questions or clarification needed. Yes, Committee Member Morrison.
Hey, good afternoon. I was just intrigued by one of the comments that was put on here because I'd never seen it before. It says at least one credential candidate was placed in out-of-state settings. I'm just wondering how that is and what that involves.
Yeah, that was an anomalous situation where you have a student teacher that then ends up moving to Oregon and was doing one phase of her teaching there. So our director of student teaching then just basically briefs that teacher on site with the California standards, expectations, and so, basically mediates that process. Here's our, while they're teaching, even though it's in Oregon, here are the California teaching performance expectations that in this case it was she, that needs to move through that process. So, it's pretty anomalous for us to have a student that's doing any phase of their student teaching outside of the state. So that's how we manage that. And I think that's something that the visiting committee, made us aware of too, that's got to be ensured that's standards of California being met.
All right. Any more questions? Member Erickson.
Thank you. It looked like you are using the data well from TPA-1, mm-hmm. and that's informing your work with the candidates and mm-hmm. how effective your programs are. How are you going to, in the future, use the assessment data from mm-hmm. TPAs 2, 3, and 4?
Well, I think we've already discussed this with our Director of Student Teaching, Irene Lopez, and she actually just was in her TED class last night with all of our student teachers and addressing that with another one of our adjunct instructors, David Peak. And so we actually got some good input from our current crop of student teachers, and they feel like it is. So there's a little bit of fuzziness. There's a little, if Irene was here today, she's trying to figure out why that's so, because it seems like the present group, they're getting the input. So it's something that's very high on our radar, and I'm confident in Irene's working with all of our instructors in that way. She's really systematized and made a comprehensive approach as a new director of student teaching to how we're going to implement that in each class and highlight it for students along the way. Yeah.
It sounded like there was some confusion about when students even submitted the test and mm-hmm. All of that. So from what I'm understanding from what you just said, that's been clarified for the students, mm-hmm. and they're on a scheduled,
yes.
or that at least they're notified of when the
right.
TPA needs to be submitted, so it's not all at the end of their clinical practice.
Right, true. Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? Clarification? Member Webb.
Actually, this might be directed more to Bob since the team lead's not here. I noticed that in Common Standard 3, under site-based supervisors certified and experienced in teaching specified content, there was a note that it was inconsistently implemented. I was wondering what if either from you or from the team lead, what was inconsistent about that particular area?
21.
Yeah, okay, I get it now. Yeah, I think the issue we had is that we just didn't see anywhere where there was obvious requirements that someone from out of that was just looking at the website could find that, and they actually brought it to us and showed it to us, but we still were like it. We didn't feel it was easy enough access to it, so they had it there, but again, like I said, we just didn't feel like the common person that was looking would be able to see exactly what those requirements were, to where they would actually have to maybe walk into the office or talk to them, give them a call on it. So we just felt that it should have been a little more obvious. And we might have been a little too strict on that, but again, we were just trying to pull out everything that we could. Yeah.
Member Alvarado?
So in Common Standard 1, it has the one item that just was not evidenced at all, and I'm wondering what is being put in place to address that particular area. And that's page 17.
That's the research-based vision.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That issue.
Yeah. I produced a document for the visiting team, and we've talked about our strategic plan and our learning covenant that we're moving through this spring to articulate. Part of it was kind of waiting for this, major event in our lives to get some feedback on what we need to do. And so we're working on that through faculty and staff meetings, articulating that by the end of this semester, and then putting it into place for the fall of 2018.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I had one question. Actually, two. On the bottom of page 8, there's a mention that single subject candidates verified that the program is strongly based toward multiple subject credentials and could benefit from increased support, and this was verified by the multiple subjects credential candidates. What is going to be the plan to provide the single subjects with the additional support that they're requesting?
Well, again, I think because of the size of our program, and I'm not sure in what conversations those issues came up with the visiting team, maybe 20% of our program are those single subject candidates. So I think some of those interviews are in, combined settings. And so they're just, and also because the disparate nature of the disciplines that they're in kind of could tend to keep them alone. So to answer your question, our single subject director, Dr. Paul Jones, is aware of that and moving towards more specific across the board in our faculty meetings, addressing that with all the single subject professors. So at this point, that's, again, I'm confident that he, having been in the program, understands that and needs to ramp that up, the specificity to each of those disciplines within the single subject program. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions, comments, needs for clarification? I was a little concerned about having this institution maintain, move forward without asking for an update of some sort on the not met. Not the quarterly report, maybe 6 months or even in a year, just coming back and giving us a report on the not met standards.
So which standards are those? Because they all look met with concerns.
Are met with concerns, sorry.
Okay.
And there is one not met, I believe. There was not met on the common standard.
And it was not evidenced, right?
Not evidenced.
Not evidenced in Common Standard 1.
Yeah. So not evidenced on Common Standard 1, inconsistently on Common Standard 2 and Common Standard 1.
So I just want to clarify, because it's one section of Common Standard 1. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Mm-hmm. Just on the each section where it wasn't not either not met or not met with concerns or inconsistently or not evidenced. Anything that didn't go to the left-hand side of that table. Yeah.
And so I certainly would support that idea in that the responses certainly are encouraging, that work is in progress, but it really hasn't been actualized. And so having some sort of a, check back point would be helpful.
Member Erickson and then Balatayo.
I think it was just said. I was going to suggest that we have a report back in maybe 6 months, quarterly reports for a year, maybe.
I agree with my colleagues, given the nature that there is a vision, but we still need to see actual concrete details on the plan and the mission of the school. Also, I'd also like to ask about the issue of Common Standard 3, where it says site-based supervisors must be certified and experienced in teaching the specified content. What are the steps in making sure that all of these supervisors are qualified?
Well, we've had numerous discussions about this. Our director of TPA, director of student teaching, faculty, it's all making those practices stringent and following through on that. So I'm confident we all have raised our consciousness about that, and being new to the program, it's like that's our practice. That's what we're doing. So,
I'd also like to see something of a memo or of a concrete list of what the specific qualifications are, or training, or how many hours included in this, this report that we're asking in a year or so.
All right, so I need a motion. Thank you.
So being that I'm still relatively new, I'm not exactly sure of the wording, but the idea would be that there be a maybe provisional with a 6-month report back.
So accept the report with the provision that we have a 6-month report back on the standards that were either inconsistent, the ones that didn't make the far right of the column. Can you write that down? Can you quote me on that one?
Anything inconsistent or not evident?
Exactly. In 6 months.
Okay, I need clarification.
It's okay. Thank you. Can I get a second?
Can I get clarification on what the motion is, though?
Okay.
So your choices are accreditation with stipulations. You can ask for accreditation with a 7th year report, which can happen anytime within this next year. It can happen in 6 months if that's what you desire. But it's what I'm hearing kind of can fall in any of those categories. So I just want you to tell us which of those categories are you talking about?
It sounds like accreditation with a 7th year report in 6 months. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Can I get a second?
Second.
Balatayo. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Great. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Okay. Thank you
Mr.
so much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Is our 1:30 available? San Bernardino? Are they ready? Okay. Okay. Fabulous. Okay, thank you.
We'll see if they can hear us.
We can hear you. Can you
So
hear us?
you can hear us?
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me too?
Yes. Is that Lisa?
Yeah. This is me.
All
Can you
right.
see me? Because I can't see me.
We can.
We see you.
We don't see Lisa.
You know what? That does not matter as long as you can hear me. I'm good with that.
All right. Thank you. Item 14 is the report of the accreditation team to San Bernardino City Unified School District. Consultant Karen Sacramento will introduce this item. Joining her via Zoom is team lead Lisa Tywater, and institutional representatives Shauna Smith, Mary Pierce, Deanne Miller, and Dan Schaefer. So we're missing, who are we missing?
from the institution, is this the full
Just
representation?
Deanne and Shanna.
Okay.
Just Deanne and Shanna. Deanne and Mary are missing.
Okay, Dan and Mary are not here.
No, Dan's there. Mary and Deanne are not.
Oh, Deanne. Gotcha. All right. So we have Shauna Smith and Dan Schaefer.
Correct.
Thank you. And does anyone need to recuse themselves? All right. Ms. Sacramento, will you begin, please?
All right. Yes. Good afternoon. So this is the report for the San Bernardino City Unified School District site visit, which was held on January 22nd through 24th. And the visit was a very thorough and in-depth review of the SBC USD teacher induction program, and as expected was focused on interviews with stakeholders and a deep review of electronic evidence provided. So I would just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the program leadership, Mary Pierce, Shanna Smith, Deanne Miller, and Dan Schaefer for their leadership and for running a highly praised induction program and in facilitating a very well-run site visit. And I would also like to note the tremendous professionalism of Lisa Tywater as the team lead, the warmth and joy and expertise that she brings to this work, both during the visit and over time with work that she's done with the commission is truly extraordinary. So along those lines of a model of the work that we do together, I would just like to add that the visit to SBC USD was extremely enriching, as I believe the program, the teacher induction program, truly embodies the vision for teacher induction in California. They have implemented a program under the new standards that captures the ideal that was in the thoughts and works when the new induction standards were designed. So it was especially fulfilling to be there and to see their rollout. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa for a more in-depth report of the program findings.
I thank you. I apologize in advance for my sore throat, and I truly wish I was there in person today. Karen's pretty much said everything that I wanted to say, but I love seeing Shanna and Dan there. Hello. It's good to see you again. And James, I saw you as part of the COA now. Is that true? Did I see James there?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, I want to start with, before I share the report, that I was privileged to sit with James and with Karen and with a group of who I consider highly esteemed induction people when we, what did we do? We updated and streamlined the induction standards. And when we sat in that room and we talked about what it should look like for teachers that was purposeful and not redundant to TPAs, we built these incredible, I thought, powerful standards, but we didn't know how anybody was going to get there. And when I actually went and saw San Bernardino Unified's induction program, they truly embody what we tried to do with those standards. And I wish there was a way for you all to take a field trip and see that program, because it is amazing. San Bernardino's huge. They have 53,152 students, it says here in the graphic, and 88.5% of them are low socioeconomic, with 27% of them English learners. And that component on diversity and supporting the student populations with candidates that mirror the populations is taken very seriously in San Bernardino, and it was one of the highlights for me. We as a team of 4 looked at this program that has 164 gen ed teachers and 48 special education teachers in the program. We did 172 interviews, and our team has unanimously gives an overall recommendation of accreditation with all standards, common standards and program standards met. I thought that it was very incredible, and the team talked about the very strategic placement of their TIP program, what they call their teacher induction program. It's in the Employee Development Department, housed in the HR division. And Shanna and her team, Shanna, isn't it 10 full-time mentors you have now?
Yes.
plus a team of part-time mentors that also serve as demonstration teachers for all the teachers in their district. At first, when I first read the program, it's woven together very intricately, and it looks like they're doing everything all over the place. And then when you go and you see it in action, it's very strategically woven together, where all teachers, not just the induction teachers, have opportunity for tip seminars and to be truly inducted into the culture of San Bernardino. I met with the superintendent himself, and he had only great things to say about the people they hire, and that they hire them into a culture where they've even changed the interview questions to make sure they get the teachers they feel are necessary for their own students. One of the other highlights I wanted to give you was that the Common Standard 5, let me get to that page, program impact, that to me is the hardest one to prove out, at least in my experience. And we had such interviews with so many candidates that just shared the impact that this program has given to them. And I know you saw it if you read through, which, by the way, was shocking to me that we begged for extra words in each of these boxes. Candidate interviews provided many testimonials that mentors had provided lasting impact. One candidate, a gentleman, shared, "This is my second career, and the onboarding and the veteran teacher provided to support me and ensure my success are amazing. They are pouring so much in the way of energy and resources into us. They really invest in us." This is the first program that I've gone to where interview after interview, both on the phone individually and in groups, regardless of the group, just talked about how much they were supported. That just-in-time support, along with the long-time learning and the Petra cycle, are so well balanced. And my favorite quote in the whole thing was from another teacher who said, my mentor is whatever I need her to be in that moment, which is what we hope for. I mean, that's what we need with these new teachers coming on with so much to deal with. And I just feel privileged to have gone and seen these people in action. And I thank you for your transparency and letting us ask questions. We had some glitches in getting enough people at some of the interviews, and there was never, ever an excuse of any kind. They just made it happen and found us more people. So I think I've babbled long enough with my sore throat. I'm going to be quiet and let you guys talk.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Lisa. It's always exciting to hear about our exemplary programs out there, and your enthusiasm is contagious. It does make me want to take a field trip. Like, I want to see this in action.
Once you have them, Shannon, then you'd have them, right?
Yes. Come see us.
That's wonderful. All right, thank you. We'd like to call on the institution now to say a few words about the visit. This is not a time to dispute the findings, but rather to provide any thoughts you had about the visit.
Thank you, and I just want to thank Karen and Lisa because it was very empowering. They were clear from the start that the process is a growth experience and a way to validate what you're doing and get suggestions for improvement, which we're always looking for. And that was truly the process. Of course, I am thrilled that what our intent of the program came out in interviews, and that's what everybody believes, and you always hope for that, and you do surveys and such, but to have it come straight from their mouths, saying how much the mentors, that's what our whole program is about, is investing in mentorship. So that was very exciting for us to hear. And Lisa, especially, just, the way that the whole process went and the time she spent with the superintendent just added value to the program from the district's perspective. People are still talking about the review at all levels and how proud of our program they are, and they're talking about, how to expand and strengthen, and that's truly wonderful as well. They've always been very supportive in our district of this program, but it's always great to have an outsider's viewpoint come in and say, yes, this is correct. So that was great. I don't know if Dan wants to add something.
Well, I would just add we're preparing to meet with our planning team to begin the process of looking at next year. And I've just got to say, you've really put some more wind behind our wings there to get that job done. So thank you very much.
And Karen, thank you also, all the prep work and coming out and seeing us and helping us prepare. We couldn't have done it without you. So really appreciate your hard work.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Before I open the floor for comments or questions from the COA, does anyone need to recuse themselves? Okay. Comments, questions, kudos from the team? Member Webb.
I just want to say that as I read the report, I think Lisa's absolutely correct. I mean, if we thought about what this looked like in our planning stage when we were looking at the strengthening and streamlining, it's right here. And what really spoke to me was one of your last statements in which you said, demonstrate a passion for student learning, a positive attitude, and a growth mindset. And I think that in induction, if that can be instilled in teachers, then we've done our job with the induction. So thank you so much for helping. And I'm not that far, so I might make a field trip, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Member Erickson.
Congratulations for a great report, and I too was really impressed with the way that the candidates were being mentored and the individual care taken with each candidate, and I would recommend that we accept the report as written.
All right, I have a motion on the floor. Any other comments before we take a second? No, I have a second by Member Borges. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, Lisa and Karen.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us to item 16. Okay.
I'd like to do 18 first, and the reason is because we have to get the computer set up with the screen for the other one.
Okay. Item up 18 is the update and discussion of survey data and accreditation. Mike Taylor and Cheryl Hickey will present this information item. Ms. Hickey, will you begin, please?
Yeah, I'm actually going to toss it to Mike. So Mike has been working very closely with Terry on the implementation of the surveys, and he'll talk about the item that went before the commission, and then I would like to engage you in a conversation about processes and procedures and thinking about using the data in accreditation. Our teams are already using the institutional level information, but there may be more that we can mine in terms of the statewide data and in terms of, whether there's criteria or triggers that might help us think about institutions that need to be a focus of site visits or accreditation activities outside of the regular cycle, those kinds of things. So I'm going to toss it over to Mike to start.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'll just talk you real quick through what the surveys are and how they were designed. And then I know part of your discussion is going to be how should they be used and Cheryl talks a little bit about how they are being used. But you'll remember that back in 2015 when we redesigned and redeveloped the accreditation system, there was a set of surveys that were developed at the same time by one of the task groups. And they were mostly completer surveys, but also an employer and a master teacher survey. And so there's currently 8 surveys being administered. We have a preliminary multiple subject, a preliminary single subject, preliminary ed specialist, preliminary admin services, a clear multiple and single subject survey, a clear ed specialist survey, then there's a master teacher survey and the employer survey. There is a link, I'll say, in the item that you have. There's several links to the surveys and to the survey website for CTC, which has the surveys themselves and the statewide reports and all the information you may want about them. The completer surveys were originally administered in 2015, and starting in fall of 2016, the completers began being routed, and they are now routed to the completer survey right at the time when they're doing their online application process for the credential. And because of that, the response rates have gone up really well on the completer surveys. And we're leaving them open all year long now, so technically they're open from September 1st to August 31st every year because everyone's on a different schedule for completing. The Master Teacher Survey was implemented in spring of 2016, and the Employer Survey was launched in October of 2016. The Employer Survey is done in the fall to avoid overlap with the CSU Employer Survey, which they give in the spring. And they're very different types of surveys. While the CSU survey it's more like an evaluation on a newly hired teacher, ours is really asking if they've hired more than one completer from a program in the last few years to evaluate what they think of the program instead of the individual teachers. The Master Teacher Survey is open from September 1st to August 31st, like the other surveys, and the Employer Survey runs from October 1st to December 31st every year. There's some tables in the agenda that I won't go over too much, but Table 1 shows the statewide response rates for the completer surveys for 2017. And I just want to point out the last two columns on that. You can see one is the percent of respondents, and the second one is the program response rates. And so the last column gives you the range of response rates for individual programs for those surveys. So, for example, the preliminary multiple subject survey had 96.7% response rate, and what that means is technically that 96.7% of the people who were sent to the survey answered at least one question on the survey. But that second column shows the rate. So for the preliminary multiple subject survey, individual programs had response rates that range from 80% to 100%. The Master Teacher Survey and Employer Survey, as I mentioned, are administered differently. So they have different rates of response. The Master Teacher Survey is sent to programs, and they're asked to send it to their master teachers and to respond. And so we have about a 35% response rate on that, which is pretty typical for surveys in general. We're getting amazing response rates on the completer surveys. And the Employer Survey, we don't really have a response rate for because we don't know, we don't have the other side of that equation. We don't know which employers have recently hired new teachers from specific programs. And so we sort of rely on them to tell us that. But we did get 835 respondents for that survey in 2017. Table 3 shows a bunch of demographic information about the program completers for each of the surveys. And Table 4 shows some sort of sample questions that go across all the types of surveys about quality of the program and how well prepared new teachers feel for their jobs. Table 5 shows some of the sort of content style questions that are included in the multiple subjects and ed specialist preliminary surveys. This one is in particular for math. Again, I mentioned the reports are linked in here, and we do have at the beginning of the item there's a link to the survey's website, which has all the additional information there and the surveys themselves if anyone's curious. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the surveys.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Hickey, would you like to add to
Yeah,
that?
I can. So Mike gave you the kind of the good news about the broad perspective, and if you have questions about how this is happening, one of the great things about it's finally coming to fruition that they wanted, the commission in particular wanted us to make sure that we moved the accreditation system to an outcomes-based system as much as we possibly can. And that then we needed some sort of outcomes data, and surveys are one type of that information. So for this year, we have told all of the institutions that are going through accreditation, the green cohort, that they should take the survey results that we've sent them. So at the end of November, the program completer survey is sent to the institution. They are required to put it on their accreditation website for the teams to look at. If it's all high, in the high 90s, and it's all positive, then you have all said it's okay for us not to ask for program completers to be interviewed. We reiterated that at the last meeting, so you all were good with that. So far, I don't think we've had any institutions where we haven't talked to any completers, but that could happen this year, if that is the case. We've also instructed the reviewers to use it to help formulate their questions. So find those areas where there might be some questions or maybe less than 100% to start to ask some questions, to use that as a helpful tool to help probe and figure out where you might ask questions of the institution. And then lastly, for this year, we've asked them to the extent we can, to include some information from these surveys in their reports. That one's becoming a little tough because people are used to writing the reports in the way that they've written them in the past. So it's just going to be a constant reminder. Please include information, particularly if you didn't review or talk to completers, because the survey stood in lieu of you talking to them. So that needs to be in the reports. That, like I said, is a little bit harder, and we will hone in on that when we do BIR training to make sure that you get to see, hey, the survey results were all high, were all positive, or there was one area where it was really clear that we needed to probe. We did, and here's what the results were. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're doing this year. But one of the things that Terry really wanted this item to come before you today is because we really want to be able to think about it in a larger sense. So, what is the plan for not only looking at it from the team perspective, but your perspective? So we have statewide data now, and is there a time when you would like to see some of that statewide data, and how do you want something to come to you? Do you want things to be triggered automatically? So if an institution, maybe you've identified a couple of questions that are particularly very important, and if an institution gets lower than a 70%, do you want to know about that? So those are the kinds of things we wanted to talk about today, to find out whether we can look at things, from a statewide perspective and be able to hone in on possible issues or questions. We had talked a lot about, when we were doing strengthening and streamlining, about the need to differentiate accreditation activities based on what we know about the institution. So if an institution has a really strong history and everything's looking really positive, maybe it's not as long as of a visit. So those are the kinds of things I want to start talking with you about. We don't have to have a plan today, but just, it'll help us formulate a plan for the future. And Catherine, jump in.
Mike, point of clarification before we get into the response rates. When we look at the program response rates and we see like 80 to 100%, when an institute, if you know this, when an institution falls into the 80%, is it because it's a small institution and one person doesn't answer, out of 5? Or is there a way of knowing if this is a large institution and 20% chose not to answer?
There is a way of knowing. On the statewide reports, at the end, you can see the individual response rates for all of the individual programs and which ones were given reports and which ones were not. The answer is yes, it could be any of those. It could be a small program where one person didn't respond, and so their rate fell that low. Or it could be a big program where lots of people didn't respond.
So without you going and researching, you don't know if that's the confounding factor, is that the 80% is falling out when it's, the percentage is higher.
Off the top of my head, I would guess that that's what's going on.
Guess.
That it's that the lowest rates are in small programs where one or two, just a handful of people don't respond. Yeah.
Which mathematically makes sense. To get a 96.7 overall response rate, I would think that it would be the disproportionate percentage when it's a small institution and one person doesn't.
It could be, yeah. The 96.7 is for all the
Right.
the entire state for all the individuals in the
Right.
state. So,
But if 20% of a mega institution didn't answer, I don't think you could have a 96%. Is my
No.
math right?
Yeah, no, that
Okay.
would not work that way, right?
Okay.
So, and
My
again, if
stats brain
you're
is a
curious
little
about
on
any
the-
specific program, they're all the response rates are listed there. So.
Statewide information. I just realized my mic wasn't on. And for some reason, there it goes. Takes a minute.
Right. So the last 2 pages of that report will show all the program.
But I wanted to show you, so there's a lot that we can learn, I think, about this information. One of the things as we're looking at the data, if you go to question number 29 on that first one, and I'm thinking not only individual issues, like we can figure out if the majority of the negative responses are from one institution, but we can also find out if there's an issue that might be brewing that's much more policy or, an issue that's more widely a problem. So like number 29 stood out on me. My field experiences help me integrate and apply major ideas developed through program coursework. Strongly disagree, 18.8%. Disagree, 12.5%. You add those up, that's 30 some odd percent. That is a scary number to me. So that tells me that this is not an institutional issue, but a much more statewide concern. So there are things that we can learn from both the institution perspective and statewide concerns. Maybe as an education prep community, we are able to address. So I'm done now. So I'd love to hear your comments.
Member Alvarado.
So 2 comments on the supervisor surveys. So you're clustering graduates from a particular institution. I believe it's 3 years worth in the last 2 to 3 years. It's also making the assumption that the person conducting the survey is fully aware of what program they graduated from.
Yeah, in fact, it requires that. Again, the employer survey is focused on programs instead of individuals, so it's designed that way, and we try to reiterate that as much as possible. And so that's right up front in the directions, that it says that the person who responds to the survey should be the person who has been involved with hiring and supervising more than one newly credentialed teacher from a specific preparation program, and then all the questions are based around the program and not the individual.
Right. And then my second question has to do with item number 10 on the master teacher survey. And by the way, full disclosure, I've talked to both Terry and Mary about this, in that I'm chair of the CSU Deans of Education group, and so many deans have approached me with concern about this particular item, in that it's asking about data that programs actually have. And so you're asking for secondhand information when you can be getting it directly. If the question is actually trying to get at how students feel supported by the mentor teacher or by the university supervisor, I think the question can be written as such. But to ask a quantitative question where you're asking for someone's opinion where they may have or may not be paying attention, can create problems for program. And I'd much rather the question get at the issue you're trying to get at, which I think has to do more with, does this master teacher feel that their student teacher was supported by the university supervisor, as opposed to asking for a number.
Mike, what is the process for evaluating the questions again? Do we know what
these questions were originally developed by a committee, so there was a surveys task group as part of the it was one of all the task groups for the accreditation design. And so these were originally designed by that task group, and we have talked about updating particularly CSTP questions to TPEs and things like that. But one of the issues we have obviously is a trend line. So right now we've got a couple of years worth of data, and we're getting more data on this, and as soon as we change the questions, then we lose that trend line. So I think your comments are good, and that's a good point. And if that data exists elsewhere, it might be a good way to do it. In terms of the intention of that, I can tell you I'm sure the task group was not aware that that data exists elsewhere. However, I do know also that we don't really have a mechanism for collecting that data currently in place.
I think also some of the survey questions are an attempt to triangulate that. If an institution is reporting that the individual supporting a candidate is out there once a week, but that a preponderance of candidates are saying they only come once a month, that then there's a discrepancy, whereas if they're both saying we see them. So it seems like that the addition of some questions would, I mean, if I'm following you, I was having a little trouble getting it to load, so I was kind of doing two things at once as you were talking, but I know there was some discussion around triangulation kind of way at the beginning of the idea of surveys, but that's not to say that the questions that you're proposing aren't really important questions also. If I was following you correctly.
Member Alvarado.
Right. No, I'm saying that, and I agree with triangulation, completely agree with that. What I'm saying is get to the core of what we're trying to find out, which is rather than having a master teacher guess a number, because I doubt that they're recording this number, ask the question that we really want to get to, which is, does the master teacher feel that the university supervisor provided adequate support for the candidate? Okay, that's the question.
But that
so
is
you want a
question
quality
9.
question.
Yeah, but
that's what
when you
question
ask
9
the number, then that's already getting into something else, is what I'm saying.
So I think that this is a really important discussion because you're not saying that frequency equals quality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Member Erickson. Another issue here, I believe, in that we're starting to do some of our supervision through technology like SIBME, and we're seeing great results because the student has to analyze their own teaching, and then when the university supervisor can do that at any time. And it also allows us this broad range of co-teachers then that might be teaching during the day, but are able to give great feedback to that supervisor. And this question does not allow us to look at that data.
I guess I'm curious whether you think that, what is it that we could provide you so that we can identify institutions that may have issues? We don't know based on just data, but is there something that we can provide you on a more regular basis, once, twice a year, analyze this data somehow, bring you the lowest? I don't know. This is all new, and this is the first time we've gotten results this high that now we can actually use it. Because before we were talking about 30%, we knew there's no way we could use it in any sort of real manner. But now that they're in the 90s, it's fantastic data. So we're trying, so
Would this fall under Common Standard 5 then also? Completer data. It would be acceptance rates versus completer rates. If you have a 100% completion rate, does that mean you're meeting the needs? Where I'm going with my question is, it's great for the COA to have this information, but if it's already being reviewed and analyzed by the Common Standards team or the team here, PSD, I'm just, how many people do we need analyzing the data, and who is the appropriate group to be doing that aside from the institution itself?
Well, the institution's looking at it in year 6. I mean, the reviewers are looking at it in year 6. What we had talked about over a course of time is to use this data also then to figure out if there may be issues that we need to hone in on outside of the accreditation cycle, the normal cycle. So if we're seeing really strong numbers and it's one institution where there are really negative issues coming up, isn't that a flag? So that's what we were trying to do in terms of the commission was really strong in terms of differentiation. They wanted to be able to say to institutions with strong histories and continuous strong data, you're looking good. We're going to go not easier on you, but we don't need to delve as deeply as an institution that may have indicators of issues. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I don't think that's duplicative at all.
So is there a data analyst or statistician that's taking a look and taking into consideration some of the things that you brought up, or I think Member Erickson also, where there may be discrepancies in the number of people reported versus the number of people at the institution? Catherine?
So I would say right now, yes and no. Okay. So the staff in the PSD are, the professional staff in the PSD are all trained, capable analysts of, I don't mean like the designation of state service analysts, but I mean in general, analysts of the data that we get. We've spent many years looking at data. So that's the yes. The no is that this is a new format for us because really there's several places data is coming from. That's coming from the annual data submission. It's coming in from surveys. And so I would say that two things are happening, that our level of analysis is our hope is to identify flags, right? Outliers and Fifi Lau, who is like the brain behind our dashboards and things, like she's creating ways to illustrate so that we can spot things quickly. That part, when you talk about who should be analyzing it, and like you mentioned, Standard 5, for example, the program is making the decision, or the institution, about what impact are we having. Okay, so I would say that the surveys could be one piece of corroborating evidence, but an outsider of the institution shouldn't be determining where your institution's having impact based on one data source of a survey. So I think that there always will be multiple individuals using the data and analyzing the data and drawing conclusions from the data and determining that this is a good data source for that, or we need to go someplace else for that. I mean, so it's not like we're abandoning everything and relying entirely on surveys.
I think that's a good point. I just want to clarify that these surveys were originally designed not for a top-down state analysis from the CTC. They were designed to provide information to programs to be used at the program level. And so to the extent they can do that, we think they're good. And to the extent that accreditation teams can also use that information in their work, I think is critical. But to the point about the questions, these questions on the Master Teacher Survey are designed for that. So the thinking is if even if we're asking the number and it's not that meaningful for us, it is meaningful at a program level. If a program sees that their completers are responding, that they were seen fewer or more times than they should have been or than everyone thought they would, then it's just a flag, and use it in combination with the other information in the survey to evaluate your own program. So that's what these surveys were designed for. They weren't really designed for we're going to review the data at CTC and try to figure out who's doing something wrong. That was never the intention behind these surveys.
So that's where my disconnect was. Is it sounded to me like it was being asked, did we want that data to come to us on a regular basis if there was a flag? And I'm thinking that might be redundant if it's going to be looked at by the site visit team. And it's going to be, I mean, what would the COA do with that information until it comes before us as part of an accreditation decision?
So I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to respond, because there was clear direction about differentiation and finding both in the data system and in surveys about where there might be indications of problems. And it's not that we would immediately shut an institution down, but it would trigger some questions. It would trigger an investigation. The one that Terry decided to pull in the agenda item number 6, there are how often were you observed by your program supervisor? Once or twice? All of that does is make us look at the data a little bit more closely and say, okay, I'm assuming that's one institution, maybe 2 institutions, or is it spread across lots of institutions and it's a high number? So, it just is a place for us to become more aware and conscious of possible issues. And then the second area is where I talked about, which is it may raise us an issue as an education prep community that we need to spend a little bit more time figuring out how to help institutions address. So there is a little bit of flagging that was asked of us 2 years ago by the commission. So, but it's not using this data alone as a decision-making, high-stakes kind of thing. It's as a start of a process, which is where I was going with how do we bring COA into the conversation if these numbers stay in the high 90s and we still get great response rates.
Right.
So.
That's kind of where it was.
Yeah.
That's my same wondering. So kind of like the late documents, or we have the report on the charges. Would this be something that might come to us on a quarterly report? These are some red flags we thought we'd bring to you as for discussion. Is that what you're thinking?
Go ahead, Catherine.
That's why when I was talking, I mentioned outliers and flags, because it wouldn't be that we would bring you all of the survey data and ask you. It would be, hey, after analysis of the survey data, we noticed this. And upon deeper look, this, like Cheryl brought up one of the findings on there that 30% didn't see their I can't remember which question it was, but so then what we would ask upstairs is, so is this concentrated into one program or a couple of programs? Is it across the state? Because it's still a problem, but it's a different kind of problem, right? Between, okay, we have a flag here that we have one institution where 30% of their candidates are reporting this, is different than, hey, we might need to provide technical assistance across the state, because 30%. And so I think what we're hoping is that by mining the data a little bit in different ways, that we would be able to engage all of you into the conversation of kind of next steps, and that it's about, to me, about outliers or some kind of trend that goes from one place to another place, and that's where professional staff can help put something together for discussion here.
I don't want to boil it down to rigid criteria like you saying. If something falls below 70%, then you must bring it to me. I don't think that helps the cause. But I think that clearly, if we can bring you a plan next time that says, okay, once a year in January of every year, we're going to bring to you an analysis of the data or something that, may bring COA into the conversation.
Member Erickson and then Member Alvarado. It's great to have this data, but right now we only have what? 1 year, 2 years? I mean, I think we need to look at trends over time. So maybe we need to wait a little bit to see what happens in the next couple of years. That doesn't mean that you couldn't bring us a report of the questions that you're thinking about. And then I was also wondering how this loops back to other committees or maybe it doesn't.
It's here. So that's why it's important to have that. I think at some point the commission's going to want to know stuff.
I mean, I
clearly.
was wondering if this is the right committee to be reviewing that data. I mean, yes, we are, but are there other committees or other, as we're building out other programs?
So when you were talking, what crossed my mind was that staff needs direction. And what I mean by that is there was a point in time when there was an issue with an institution, and as part of our reporting to you after the site visit, we said, well, they've been late with all their accreditation activities. And as a body, you said, well, if we need to know that. So then you directed us. You directed us that, hey, we want to know. So that created item 8, that every time something's due, we tell you. So I think one of the things that we're kind of in a crux here is that if something springs out to us, I feel like we need direction, that if something is odd or pervasive or whatever, I think staff sort of needs a avenue to be able to bring it to you, because we need that direction.
Member Alvarado.
So I do understand that the surveys are one piece of sort of a larger view of a program, but I'm just wondering, and I don't know if this is the right venue, about given that, and again, I speak only for the CSU, that our survey actually identifies the candidate, the school, the principal that's overseeing their work, to evaluate the candidate without even identifying where they graduated from. It's like we just want to know how they evaluate that candidate, and whether there's been any analysis or what have you in comparing those results with these results that are asking essentially for a supervisor to aggregate and just generally speaking all these candidates within the last 3 years, and if there's any sort of how does that compare?
We haven't looked at that data, but it turns out Paul Tuss and I are old friends at this point. We've been communicating with the Center for with development of these surveys. Paul was on our original design team, and so that's one of the reasons why our survey is as different as it is because we didn't want to get in the way or confuse anybody in the field about the CSU survey. And so, the answer is yes, that could happen, but it has not yet. I think the discussion being what it is around just getting a hold of more data. Ours is so vague, the more years we get into it to compare with individual evaluations, the more likely we are to see correlations in that way, if that makes any sense. So I think that's a great idea, but no, that hasn't been done yet.
I just want to mention with Deborah's comment about the time. This is new, and it's only 1 year of data. I think that's a really important, legitimate comment that we have to, take. I don't want to say with a grain of salt, but we have to take it for what it's 1 year, and looking at trends over time is really critically important. So I think that definitely has to be part of our plan, to give it some time to see if it's, and especially because a lot of the standards are new. So,
All right, Ms. Croy.
I really liked two things that came up, what Cheryl said and Catherine about being able to serve the needs of the state of California with the information that we're gleaning here. And yes, we may see some things that point to more individual institutions, but the statewide piece is a huge responsibility, I think, and by going with over the years, in the next couple of years, when we can get that data and really look at it across the years and see what it tells us, it's going to help us to inform, and that's where I think what Cheryl's asking too, even is your guidance as well. When we get that, then what do we do with it? What's the best approach, and how do you want it brought to you? Because I think of our end of the year reports that you bring now, it makes sense to me to have some type of end of the year, like you said, to just show you the trends. And I think, and maybe I can speak with my old hat on from an IHE as a chair and say, in some voices, I think I was hearing just a little bit of, yeah, but maybe that was just a bad year for us. And so to be careful about zeroing in on that as one source of evidence without triangulating, which as you've stated, we want to triangulate the data, but yet we also don't want to overlook something that is blaring over and over and over again. And maybe I'll say this, I don't know that it would be true, but let's say all institutions that are smaller than this seem to be having this type of issue or concern. And all larger institutions seem to be having this. And then across all of the institutions, we're seeing this. Those types of things I think could be really, really helpful.
Member Erickson. So I would make a recommendation that we ask staff to do an annual review of the data, knowing that this first year, it's not multiple years, but bring back to us the trends, the depth that Katie was just Dr. Croy was just talking about, concerns that you see, issues in maybe supervision, issues we notice in our data about teaching EL, and it doesn't seem to matter how much we infuse it into the coursework or how much we try to put them in a placement where they're going to learn more about how good teaching skills with ELs. That still comes up as a concern for us. So I would think we'd be able to analyze some of those bigger pieces. So I guess my recommendation would be that there'd be an annual review of the overall data by staff and bring us back trends and concerns, or trends and issues maybe, and that we leave that granular piece to the time when the programs are being reviewed. That should be an analysis in their report, and that the reviewers should be able to look at that and say, over time for this particular institution, and how are you responding to those issues? Member Scon.
So, because I'm vaguely remembering the conversation a couple of years ago, and so if we wait until the report to go a little bit more individualized, then we're not catching them, but being alerted to it sooner rather than later to try and help them. So I don't know if I'm remembering it wrong like that. I thought that was part of the conversation, that we wanted a way to kind of be oh, we need to support them now and not wait 2 years or whatever till the report happens.
So would this, along with your recommendation, would there be space where this body would want staff to, if something significant, I don't know how else to frame it, but something that causes staff to say, this is unusual and of concern, would this body want to know about that for the purpose of potentially differentiating the timing of a site visit or some other kind of follow-up because I feel like that's what the commission directed staff to partially use this data for. And so we kind of need, I think, you to say, if something comes up, come tell us about it. Am I hitting the mark there?
Yes.
Okay.
Member Erickson. I guess I would. I understand the concern about coming back, but we would have to be very specific, wouldn't we, as to what you were looking for and at what percentage point or at what level, so that there'd be some criteria around what comes back to a public body.
So I think that you could actually use this year not to be specific. You could direct us to have internal conversations, and then if we feel like, that there's a preponderance of evidence that would lead to perhaps differentiating the length of time between a site visit, because we as staff cannot decide to go sooner. Only you can. And right now, we don't have a formal way of getting that permission. And so I don't think you have to identify specific questions, but I feel like you need to say, we welcome hearing from staff if something surfaces. I mean, I understand the public part too, so I don't know.
And so what are are you considering as including the institution or the organization in this? If you see an issue, would the head of the organization be alerted and have a chance to talk about how their organization is addressing that issue, or would it just come to us as a concern? I don't know.
Well, those are the kinds of questions we're posing here, because I don't think the first thing is we send a team of people out there and they do a full visit. It's more about raising the question with the institution. Oh, we've noticed these data, and talk it through. Now, I don't know. That's where I don't know where and how we formulate this formalize it, because I think there's a possibility that at a point you may want to see a focus site visit, that the data is so, I'll say the word, alarming for whatever reason, and it's over a course of several years or 2 years. It's not 1 year's worth of data, because I can't see that happening, but over the course of a couple of years, we're seeing a trend at a particular institution, and the numbers are looking very consistent that there is an issue. So, I think part of the strengthening, streamlining was being able to pull something out of the middle of the accreditation cycle and saying, hey, we really need to look deeper into what's happening there. So and we don't have those systems in place. So that's kind of the start of this, along with the data system that we'll talk about in a minute. But right now that's not there. Yeah, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Oh, hold on just a sec.
And this is not an action item, so we don't need any particular motion.
Item.
We just needed guidance.
Yeah, and I think you're getting a lot of guidance, a lot of great, thoughtful things here. I do want to just a reminder of what Mike said about the spirit of how. I mean, you said it, and we keep coming back down to this really granular work, which I see as it could get out of hand with regards to the amount of work that it would generate for the professional services division. Again, Mike, if I can say that the genesis was to give the institutions more information about the program improvement, and also to give us if a tool. If there is some red flags out there, and the question seems to be, how is that tool identified? How is that tool brought to us, and how often is it brought to us? And I think that's. I just wanted to kind of capture our thinking there, because I think we've been talking about this a little bit, going around a little bit, and I think we could bring it home. it's not an action item. In fact, maybe we can walk away and think about it a little bit more. Your team can think about it. We can think about it and talk about it again in a month. It's a lot to chew on, and we don't want it to be high stakes, but I can feel that, I know in my tummy it's feeling a little high stakes. So how do we keep this spirit of program improvement and assuming positive intentionality on the part of our institutions with utilizing this great tool that you have provided us? So I'd like to suggest that we table this for a month and come back with your thoughts. You all will have generated some more thoughts, and we've got lots of time. As you said, we're in the early stages, growth over time, change over time. We need years of data. Maybe in 3 years, we're going to say, you know what, this didn't really show us a lot. It was helpful to the institutions, but there were no red flags. But we need some more time to think about that. So I don't want to cut you off, Member Scon.
So kind of in line of that, it is only a couple years and it's new, and I kind of liked your suggestion about like taking this year to kind of see, is it possible to kind of give you guys the freedom for this next year? And I'm just throwing this idea out for maybe us to talk about next month, the freedom to look at the data and without bringing a particular institution to the table, an example like, oh, we've been looking at the data and here's an example of a data point. Is this something you would like to know about, and kind of further the conversation so that we're not putting an institution on the line without having specific criteria yet, that maybe we take this next year to give you guys the freedom to look at the data and say, well, this is what we were thinking that might be a red flag. What do you guys think?
Okay, so can we table this then, leaving it with that great suggestion right there, bring it back next month and see if there's any new ideas generated? Does that sound like a good idea? Okay, so this is a action item. Information item. No action is necessary at this time. Thank you so much, Mike, for sitting there patiently, and Ms. Hickey and Ms. Carney. And we will move on to last item, which is item 19. 16. Sorry, I have that right in front of me. Thank you. All right, Nicole Hill will present this information item. It is the update and discussion of the annual data system. Ms. Hill, will you begin, please?
It should take about 30 seconds. There we are. Thanks, Jamal. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole. I work in the Professional Services Division, as you all already know. And I manage the annual accreditation data system. So I think ADS is a wonderful tool for us to be able to collect data on our institutions. You may be wondering what type of data is being collected. So we will receive data on how commission-approved programs are delivered locally and what types of programs are operating, where, and how. Please remember that ADS is still in its infant stages, so with the feedback that we receive from our institutions next year, we hope to make improvements and make it more accommodating for everyone. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and segue into our demo. So I'm going to log in. Well, I'm already logged into the system. We're going to explore UC Davis's report set. So if you can direct your attention to one of the three monitors, or one of the monitors. And so my view is going to look a little bit different from the institutions because I have full admin rights. So right now you see obviously more than one institution, but I'm going to go straight to Davis. Okay. So here you will see the report set. The report set shows 3 ways to view the programs at the institution. All commission-approved programs are required to report annually. So that's both active and inactive. The report set also includes these buttons at the top. This is where ADS users can add and remove users and also edit contact and other institution information. And then just to draw back on the manage contacts button, there are 4 different permissions within the system. There's unit head, security delegate, program delegate, and institution staff. So it's really important to keep in mind that only certain roles can assign staff. Only certain permissions within the system can assign other users with permissions. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and go to that page. So right here is the institution contacts page. This lists the roles and the contacts within the system. And in order for the unit head and the security delegate to add permissions to each contact, they will click on Manage User Permission, and then click on a user's name, and then simply highlight the permission that they want them to have, and then it will just drag over to the right. Okay, so it's pretty simple and self-explanatory. So now I'm going to go back to the report set page.
Excuse me, Nicole.
Sure.
So those four designations, they have different authority, and the unit head has to be in control at all times of deciding who from their institution gets to do whatever.
Absolutely. So the unit head is responsible for ensuring the data is submitted annually through ADS. The security delegate is responsible for creating the report and entering the data. The program delegate is similar to the security delegate, except they cannot assign any permissions. Institution staff have the ability to create the report, enter data, and submit to the unit head. And lastly, the BIR team member has access to the reports for accreditation activities. Okay. And all of these roles are also, all of these permissions are listed in detail on our website. Okay. So directly below this, you will see all of the programs for UC Davis. Each program is asked to respond to specific questions. Some of the questions are asked of all programs. Okay. Each program shows information for the type, level, pathway, and delivery method. Okay. So now we're going to explore how to develop a report for a multiple subject teaching credential. So users would simply, you can either click on report set and add report to pull up the reporting questions, or you can simply click on the blue hyperlink that says no report created, and it'll take you to the same page. And again, click on add report. And then this pulls up the program deck. So as you can see, the program is already populated. So then you would click on the level, and you would select the appropriate level. So in this case, postgrad, and then the pathway. And the pathway is basically clinical experience. So in this case, it would be student teaching. And then you would click on the correct delivery method. The delivery method is essentially how the material is being transferred to the candidate. In this case, it would be face-to-face. And then you would click on Add Report. And then,
Paul?
Yes.
I just want to, so if you also had an intern program, you would be building a separate, you would answer so for all the pathways you have to
Yes.
answer those separately. So it's not like you have to choose which. You will do it for all.
So right now, our SIG only tells us whether you've been approved for both a student teaching or an intern. This will give us much more richer data. If an institution has 4 different pathways to a particular credential, then this will be able to capture more of those pathways. And over time, we'll have to, tweak them as we need greater information. But it'll give us a much easier way of being able to answer some basic questions about how many post-grad programs versus how many undergrad, post-grad combinations do we have? Those kinds of questions that we can't answer right now.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the report questions. I'm sure you're all curious as to what type of questions we are asking. So the questions ask for data on program demographics, newly enrolled candidates, program completers, and candidates who were canceled out of the program. At this time, we want institutions to focus on submitting data. So far, 533 reports are currently in progress, 466 have not started their report, and 36 are ready for submission, and 15 have not submitted. So in order to help our institutions better understand the system and answer the reporting questions, we have developed several FAQs. These FAQs are posted on our website and are consistently updated. We also hold ADS office hours twice a week with a morning session and an afternoon session. So that's where people can just drop in and ask any questions that they have regarding the system, or if they need help with creating an account or adding users to the institution. That's essentially what it's for. The office hours began in the beginning of February, and we're going to extend them through the month of March. So thank you for watching my demo. That's all I have. If you all have any questions for me, I'm happy to address them to the best of my ability.
So obviously we're just in the building this process. I think Nicole said infancy. And so we can't really use it yet. Institutions are building these program decks, and they have, I think, until the end of April. Is that right?
Well, there's no hard deadline.
There's no hard deadline, okay.
At this time. But
Right.
we want to encourage people to submit data now.
Right.
April.
But then next year it should give us a better sense, like enrollment. So that information should all be up here, and it'll be really helpful for the site visit teams. Even though there's no outcomes data here, there's no exams data or anything like that. Over time, we want to build the system working with the field. But at least it gives us some indication of how many pathways, what kind of pathways. Are they face-to-face? Are they hybrid? Are they technology-based? Just more information than we have ever been able to get. And in the past, we've had to mine each and every program document for that information. This will help us a lot be able to at least talk about it in terms of a statewide manner, and then look up an institution with basic information.
And it's also used by the site visit team, correct? So it gives them more information, yes.
Nicole, could you go back to the page? Go back to the beginning where you chose postgraduate. I just want to show something. So instead of choosing postgraduate this time for multiple single, could you choose graduate? Excuse me, could you choose undergraduate? Sorry. So let's say they have a postgrad, they built that deck, and they also have an undergrad. So pause for a second and choose undergrad. Okay, so before we get to pathway, because now we know the level, the pathway, the only pathways that should populate are the ones that are able to be offered at an undergrad level. So what you should not see here is an intern program, because you can't have an undergrad intern program. So you'll see that that has dropped off. So so if she was to then choose student teaching, because it's an undergrad program now, the questions on there would be specific to programs that are pertinent to a student teaching undergrad program. So you wouldn't see questions about the kinds of support and well, that's not a question on there, but I can't pull one up, but it's not, you should never have to put not applicable for that program, because we have, and I'm sure that over the course of the next year, we're going to find out that, oh, well, yeah, there was those questions that aren't applicable, but we really worked with the developer of this so that the only questions that would appear would be questions that have to do with that type of program. So, the questions for SLP are going to be different than the questions for a multiple single subject undergrad student teaching based program. So that's why if you have two pathways and you have two unique delivery models, you'll have 4 program decks that you're responding to the questions that are specific to that program. Okay. Thank you for backing us out to that.
Yeah,
Sure, you're
that was a
welcome.
good point of clarification. Yes, co-chair.
No question, just a comment to acknowledge the wonderful work. I think the data is long time in coming. It's very valuable. I think it's very accessible, and I think it's very useful, and both for the candidates and also for the work here at the commission. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, points of clarification? I feel like I'm reading the room, and there's a lot of information at these meetings. All right. This is an information item. No action is necessary at this time. Thank you, Ms. Hill.
I just want to acknowledge Nicole, because she came on as a new employee and we threw her right into this brand new system. and into office hours with institutions of higher ed and other institutions asking lots of questions. So she's done a really good job of getting up to speed very quickly. So
thank you.
Nice job, Nicole.
All right. I do believe that brings us to item 19. Is public comment. Does any member of the public have anything it wishes to say? Okay. Then we will adjourn, and having no further business, we will meet again on March 22nd and 23rd, 2018. I believe Cheryl has some thoughts on that meeting.
Well, I'm going to work on the agenda early next week. Well, actually, I have a site visit next week. So at some point next week, I'm going to work on it, and I will let you know whether that's going to be a 1-day or a 2-day meeting. So I'll let you know by the end of next week. Right now, 22nd, 23rd.
And just when is,
I'm hearing Thursday, although that poses a problem for me, but that's okay. I'll figure it out. My site visit, they already bought their tickets for Friday morning.
Co-chairs here.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So it will be the 22nd.
Okay.
We will see. I'm going to do my best.
Okay. And just want to thank the members of the Committee on Accreditation for flying out, being here. The rich conversation. I'm just going to say it sounds trite, but I continue to be in awe of everybody's thoughtfulness, preparedness, and the PDS. Let's give it up for them, really. All right. Thanks. Safe travels, everyone. We'll